Hi, Simon. We'll start when Brad arrives.
Yeah, I'm just pinging him now to see if he's around. In fact, actually, his office is around the corner, so I'm just going to go walk over. So give me a minute.
No worries, thanks. Hi, Andrew. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you fine. Yep.
Excellent. Andrew, are you able to see the main screen?
Yeah, I can see the Abacus 6.0 demonstration slide.
Very good.
Brad is running a few minutes late, so I suggest we just get cracking.
Shall we start without him, or?
Yeah.
Okay, no worries. Yeah. Okay, excellent. Very good. So what we're going to do, Simon, we'll go through a quick introduction, who we are, what we do, and then we'll look at your needs pretty much at a high level. So the first 10-15 minutes is going to be a quick introduction, and then Andrew will come online and he will be demonstrating the Abacus Enterprise architecture, and then he'll be going through all your questions. What we could also do, record the whole demo and send it afterward, just in case, if you need it for your references. So that can be done as well.
Okay, so good.
Very good. Excellent. So thanks again for taking the time to meet myself and Andrew today. Again, my name is Joe Biga. I'm a sales executive at Avolution Software. So joining us today is Andrew, who's one of our Abacus consultants, and he has been with Avolution for the last several years. So today we'll be discussing Abacus and how it can benefit your organization. Now, some of the common challenges, or some of the First of all, I'll be speaking about Avolution and our history and our flagship, our product Abacus. Secondly, I'll be speaking about some of the common challenges that our clients use Abacus to solve. Thirdly, Andrew will give you a short demonstration on how Abacus works. Finally, we'll answer some of your questions. Now, some of the common challenges clients use Abacus for are building and maintaining a metadata model, application lifecycle management, dynamic and easy use of analysis reports, application rationalization, creating and understanding the current enterprise architecture, and creating future state architecture and road mapping toward these. Now, a brief background about the current enterprise architecture at Norton runs Fulbright, and understand that currently multiple Excel files used to collect data, import to Visio, then presented on PowerPoints. So there is a need for a more advanced tool to manage the enterprise architecture and roadmaps. So Avolution was founded in 2001 as a spin-off of University of Technology Sydney. We are a recognized leader in enterprise architecture and digital strategy. As you can see from the Gartner and the Forrester Wave reports, we have always been a leader in the Gartner Magic Quadrant. So really, what we do with Abacus is to help our clients understand and plan their organization using enterprise modeling, visualization, and analysis. Generally, I like to show this slide to show or to highlight the fact that Abacus is not industry specific. We have clients across all verticals, and as long as your organization is complex enough, there's a value to be had from a tool such as Abacus.
I'm still seeing the content slide, by the way.
Can you see the slides?
Okay.
Now this is the slide that's... Sorry, the slides weren't moving.
Yeah, there we go. Right. Have you got what legal clients have you got on there?
Yes, we do. So mainly the government one is the one that could be relevant. I'm sure Andrew has some experience in some legal organizations as well.
Yeah, so the best thing I guess to do is to send over the list of all the legal ones we have. I think some of the other clients we have tend to stem around the same kind of, I'm going to say, security measures, if you like. So things like insurance companies and finance companies. It's probably best if we follow up and send the legal ones on to you.
Yeah, sure, that'd be useful. I mean, it's always just helpful from a procurement angle.
Yeah, of course, yeah. That's not a problem.
If we can demonstrate other legal firms have already moved what they have, then it just makes life easier for us.
Very good. So going back to the next slide. Let me just take that to the next one. Okay, so basically, sorry, I had it all this ready. It looks like the PowerPoints are not working from my side. Let me just try it again. Save that. Okay, so now it's better. It's actually moving when I'm clicking on next. So pretty much that was the introduction about the abacus. So you have seen what we think about abacus and what some of our clients think of abacus. The next thing is to show what the experts think. So as you can see, we constantly rate high on the Gartner and Forrester list, as well as in a lot of dependent tool reviews. We're very proud of being the highest rated EA tool in the 3 use cases. We feel this reflects the hard work that we put into making sure abacus is flexible enough to help effectively in most real-world situations. So as you can see from the Forrester Wave 2019, we are ahead of the crowd when it comes to vendor scores, 10 out of 13 criteria, and the overall highest score for both current offering and strategy. The scores for market presence were also among the highest vendors. One interesting thing about the peer insights is that those are reviews of our clients' experience both during and after the deployment. So we're especially proud of our 4.7 score in the peer reviews, as this reflects how our customers really felt during their deployment and usage of abacus. So as you can see, we rank extremely high here and have an exceptionally fast deployment time, as shown the fact that 69% of the projects deployed in less than 3 months and 92% in less than 6 months. So why abacus? You have seen what your peers think of us and the experts, so really the question is, what makes abacus different from other EA tools, and why are they choosing us? So we have over 100 frameworks freely available. Abacus supports over 100 different frameworks and notations across a broad range of domains. Abacus also enables the bespoke frameworks to be developed with ease. So the Avolution framework is the best breed solution comprised of TOGAF, Archimates, BPMN, APQC, and PEAF. As you saw earlier, we are all about fast and thorough deployment. We can even configure in just a day. So another advantage is analysis. So that basically Abacus enables users to conduct in-depth analysis of information across the architecture. So out of the box, it has algorithms, metrics, performance, reliability, and agility. So to summarize, Abacus provides a way for all of your stakeholders to stay fully informed on what's happening within the organization, and as well as showing them the results of any new actions or changes. So now Andrew will give you a demonstration of Abacus 6.0 in action.
Perfect, thanks Joe. I'm just going to start sharing my screen. Simon, just let me know once you can see that. While that's loading, do you have any questions on anything that's been shown so far?
No, that's cool. I've got a Q&A screen at the moment. So okay, right.
Yeah. So hopefully now, as much as there's a few things popping around, you should be able to see Abacus.
Yeah, got the start screen. Yeah.
Cool. So I'm going to take you through some of the main features and functionalities in the tool. So I know at the beginning, Joe mentioned some of the challenges that you had already. Am I right in thinking it is just kind of Office-based tools you're using, so Excel and Visio, and not some other EA tool at the minute?
Yeah, we don't have anything in place at the moment. I mean, I don't know. Do you want me to describe the situation here?
Yeah, exactly. That would be good. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So we are a very immature enterprise architecture organization. Okay. So it's kind of we've got a small number of architects. There are 4 of us. We're kind of split a little bit across domains. So I look at applications. We've got an information architect. We've got a cloud and infrastructure architect, and then we've got somebody that looks exclusively at SAP. But let's not worry about SAP for the purposes of this conversation.
Sure.
And we're a federated structure. I think is the best way of describing it. We're actually a brine, which is a bit weird, but I'm not going to that now. So the architecture team is global, but it's very thin veneer sitting on top of what are very independent regions, which have their own COOs, their own CIOs, their own solution architects, their own budgets, etc. So what we're doing from a global level essentially is herding cats at the moment. So so one of the challenges that we're trying to break at the moment is just the classical central repository. So let's just get a single view of stuff, okay? Because we don't have that. That's split across a bit in CMDB. I doubt the accuracy of it though. A bit in ServiceNow, lots of spreadsheets, bits of stuff in people's heads. Most of our architecture documentation is locked away in Word documents, so obviously they get out of date very quickly. So we, it's kind of spread out all over. So that single repository thing is quite a big win for us.
Okay.
And then I think probably where we will go from that immediately after that is there is a rationalization exercise that we think we could get a win from. But also I think in terms of if we think about what our foundational things are for us as a firm, and we're a law firm, so really it's documents. We produce knowledge in the form of documents. It's things like our document management systems, the way that we communicate and collaborate with our clients around documents, the way that we produce documents, the way that we discover information locked away in documents. It's all about that, and we want to try and standardize that sort of stuff. So there are talking about roadmaps and stuff, we could produce roadmaps out of our ears, but the key things at the moment that we want to focus on are things that will make the lives of lawyers and their experience better. So it's trying to get Office 365 off the ground, trying to move Exchange into the cloud, trying to come up with a global standardized DMS system. So, that's really hard to do that sort of stuff when we don't even know what, we don't have a consistent place that tells us what version of DMS somebody's at. So that's, it's that kind of stuff that we're trying to get to at the moment.
Okay, sure. So essentially, from that kind of overview, application rationalization is, I guess, the main driver for a tool like this. Obviously, apart from having everything in one place, but is that where you see the kind of first, I'm going to say, project that Abacus can be applied to?
I think that's the first big win for us, yeah.
Okay, perfect. So there's a few things in Abacus that we've mentioned at the beginning in terms of the support of different frameworks and notations, and that's something that's, it's quite theoretical, and dare I say, it's something that the architects might want to get into and try and figure out what they actually want to use. A kind of quick rule of thumb that I found over the years is, if you've got someone there that's maybe certified to use something like TOGAF, then it might just be what you end up using because there's expertise internally. If there isn't, and you might already have an idea of other frameworks or notations you want to use, obviously feel free to use that as well. But we've developed our own, and it's kind of like a hybrid framework, which is taking bits from other areas and basically folding all of that into one area. The main reason for that is we kind of want to see these as accelerators. They're not something that you really want to spend weeks deciding on what to use. Kind of want to just decide now, change it if it doesn't fit properly, but at least it means you can start getting some data into Abacus.
Yeah.
Internally for you guys, are these frameworks something that you've maybe seen before or have any idea of what you want to use, or you're more just looking for maybe guidance from us in terms of best practice?
So, I'm familiar with TOGAF, but I think I think the reality of what we've got is a centralized architecture team isn't going to work very well here, so I want to distribute out into the regions, into the sort of federated structure, and there'll be various people at various kind of levels of maturity there. So simple is good. I mean, what I like about TOGAF is probably the architecture, content framework, a little bit of the ADM, although it's a bit waterfally. So I'm happy to kind of mix and match a little bit. What we don't really have a lot of maturity in at the moment in terms of framework is the kind of the strategy stuff, the processy stuff. We do have capability models and things like that, but we don't have process models. So I think focusing on aligning applications to capabilities, and then what those applications kind of sit on top of in terms of the technology and stuff, I think is probably where we'd want to start off. Yeah.
So from our kind of development of our framework, from kind of best bits from other frameworks, we've started with something relatively standard and straightforward. So it's basically just people, processes, and technology. So you have application lists, processes or capabilities. There might be some kind of ownership for these areas, and then effectively the infrastructure or perhaps the technology that underpins those applications. And this certainly might be where you start off with. You probably have Excel spreadsheets of applications or tables in ServiceNow for your infrastructure, so it should be relatively easy to kind of move into this quite quickly.
Yeah, I'm just to say, Brad's just joined us now.
Okay, sure.
Yeah, actually, I'll let you talk. I'll let you go through the demo for a bit. I do have some kind of questions around this sort of stuff, but you'll probably come to it, so I'll just let you go.
Yeah, that's fine. If there's anything you want to ask as I go through, obviously just feel free to stop me. It's probably easier to go through as we go through these diagrams and visualizations. Essentially, this is how we've split out our meta model or framework or notation into different levels. So we kind of classify this as a level 0, where you might start off with, and what you might then end up with is, and don't be put off by the complexity of this, but it's essentially everything within an organization. So projects, programs, risks, objectives, anything that you can kind of point a finger at. Now, this is customizable, obviously. If you start off with something like this level 0 model, and you think, well, we don't really have any kind of strategic, layers into this model, we can quite easily add that in. That's kind of the benefit of using something like Abacus, is it basically flexes around whatever kind of model you want to start using.
Yeah.
So the first port of call usually in Abacus is to try and obviously import your data. So there's various views in Abacus we can use to help support that. One of the first ones I'll open up is actually a simplified version of our application catalog. So catalogs in Abacus, think of them as glorified Excel spreadsheets really. They're essentially just a way of capturing information or list-based views. So you probably already have something similar. Perhaps, maybe lists of applications, maybe the application's owner, the version of the application, or the supplier. But Abacus then means you can start connecting these applications to other areas of the organization. Which department uses it, which processes use the application, which technology does the application require, and all of this then falls into different avenues for things like road mapping and life dates of technologies. Yep, sorry.
It's Brad here. So in terms of things like department, can that be like multi-value? So
yes. So all of these, what look like hyperlinks, are effectively connections to other objects in this main repository. So in this particular example project, we have pretty much every single component from that meta model level 3 view. So these departments in here, you can effectively have multiple departments owning maybe this application. So it's quite easy and quick to update that information directly in here then. Okay. Now you can control the kind of... Yeah, sorry?
And from there, it is easier to just grow it out from there afterwards. So if we want to start at maybe a high level where we group it based on organization, we can then start splitting it out to a more granular detail at a later stage, correct?
Exactly, yeah. So the way we've grouped our applications currently is by region first, and then you can almost think of this as by function. So we've got all the Australian applications, these are the front-end ones, these are the back-end ones, but you can choose any type of grouping structure you like within Abacus. The benefit, of course, is with all this data in one place, it means you can kind of swap and choose over time how you group and aggregate these data sets together.
I mean, is there a benefit of putting a location into an application list as opposed to adding a location as an entity that you separate organizational entity?
So there's a couple of reasons why you might want to. So a couple of our clients recently have kind of what they call EU exit plans, essentially, and the idea is for them is to maybe understand who's using the application or who owns it in terms of departmental structure. In terms of location, they first want to know where is this hosted, perhaps. So location in terms of geography is quite useful for capturing applications. I would say typically it isn't something that's directly on the app. You know, if it's basically a black box like Office 365, you have no idea where it's really hosted or where that location is. It is quite difficult to manage that. So you will get those scenarios where, you know, third-party tools you're using, you might not be too sure where they are. So you can certainly try and capture some of the infrastructure behind the scenes and capture where that's hosted or located instead.
Right. Okay.
This particular view is, I said, a very simple view because it's only starting to look at maybe 2 or 3 connections and 4 or 5 different properties or attributes. There is a more detailed view, and this is essentially how you can start slicing and dicing this data for different people. So, someone might indeed want this simplified view, and other users might get this whole application portfolio view showing various other properties then. So there are things in here like recommendations for the applications. Do you want to retain this? Do we want to retire the application? How critical is the application? The scores, calculating things like business and technical fit. So there are various properties in here that you can start capturing quite quickly. Now these span across cost, technology, infrastructure, life cycle dates, all the properties that we find most users want to capture. There's the ambition side of saying, yes, we want all of this. There's the reality of saying we don't actually have all that data right now. In terms of the way you're capturing applications or any data that you have, these kind of areas, what you're currently capturing, these kind of attributes?
Yes, they are. I think the way that we are trying to classify them as well is by capability, which I think you've got process on there, but I think we would swap process for capability.
Yeah.
But also by our technical reference model as well, which is a kind of hierarchy in its own right. So we'd want to, I don't know what we want to do, whether we'd want to maintain a new hierarchy for that and add it in as a field on here. But yeah, I mean, so it's location based. So we've got, we create them by region, and yeah, certainly what I'm looking at here, what the type is, who the business owner is, who the IT owner is, all that sort of stuff. Yes, we capture, and we want to get it in various different places, but we want to get it consolidated into one place.
And just can also add. Or another question from my side. So I mean, we've got location. Mm-hmm. I mean, from our side, we probably want to have location, i.e. where data is stored or the app runs from. We need to know office, and we need to know entity as well. We might need to know country.
Which entity?
Legal entity.
I think that's probably what we've got here in this location, here in the hierarchy aspect of it, the segregation, because then actually on the underlying infrastructure, you could say what the location of the data center is, and that would be a separate location. So
I'm saying from in terms of if we went with Abacus, the model needs to be extendable, that it can capture that, okay?
Yeah, of course. So what you would have found on something like our level 3 model, we have a single thing called location. So location for us is some kind of geographical location. So you could quite easily extend that into a hierarchy that says location, entity, etc. And the two avenues
might not be a hierarchy, might be multiple.
Might be properties or something.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So in terms of those locations, are those captured separately in another spreadsheet, or are they just columns in the application one?
They're columns in the application list.
Okay. Yep, that's fine. So certainly when you're looking at importing content, obviously the benefit is that you have all of those in one spreadsheet. Obviously, if you have other spreadsheets, we can link those up, but it means we can start importing that quite quickly into Abacus.
If I just a question on that import, sure. Because obviously when you import stuff, there's usually some kind of setup that you need to do beforehand. If I've got fields that have sort of fixed values in them, and I try and import, is that going to fail, or is it going to add, or can I choose?
Yes. So the two ways of importing into Abacus, there's a way of actually building up a configuration file that says column A is this, column B is this, column C is this. That's something that we can do. I typically recommend building up the template in Abacus first as a blank catalog, so that you can basically just export and import the content in that way.
Okay.
The benefit, of course, is if you do have drop-downs, it will persist across the import as well, so you'll see some of these are drop-down values. The other benefit is in Abacus, you can decide on, if you like, a level of data quality. So there's a fine balance here between making sure that people enter in the correct information, but also not restricting them so much that they don't enter in anything because they can't. The idea is to first maybe relax some of these permissions in Abacus and say, we've given you an option here to select something. If you decide to type in your own value, that's okay for now, but you might get a warning that says, hey, you've got a value in here that isn't quite according to the structure. We'll let it go for now, and you can decide if you want to enforce those later on.
Okay, so if I go through a kind of a data quality process where we're not necessarily using the Abacus interface to enrich fields, because we might, so say we add a new field in, or we've got a field that's largely blank and we want to get people to fill it in now. Is the process that we just download everything and then I can distribute that as a spreadsheet, because I'm not necessarily going to have everybody have access to Abacus
at day one, yeah.
And then at day one, and then import. Am I going to overwrite stuff, or can I upload just subsets of a catalog?
Yep, so you'll see in here we've got just over 1,000 applications. So this is all the applications we have in this example project. What you typically will do is start to produce some other catalogs that says, well, let's just look at the applications we're retiring. So you might add filters, 63 of these applications exist, and this is the one that you might just export. Now, filtering by recommendation probably isn't what you'll be doing. You'll probably be filtering down by location or entity, and that's how you can distribute those catalogs to the right users instead of giving them a list of everything within Abacus.
Okay, and then it will just sort itself out in terms of the import.
Exactly, yep. So anything that they change, when they import, that will obviously write the values to Abacus. The only caveat to that is the fact that you mentioned ServiceNow at the beginning. So it depends typically where the master information or the source data sits. So for ServiceNow, are you capturing applications in there, or is that purely infrastructure stuff?
We're capturing services really, as opposed to applications. But we are working on the CMDB for our infrastructure perspective.
Yeah, well, so I mean, we will kick off a full CMDB program this year. At least we've got it targeted as a project. In terms of infrastructure and infrastructure related to services, that's been mapped out at the moment, and it's in a fairly decent shape. What we probably would be doing is looking at, and I mean, for day one, we might not do the Snow integration. Just from a licensing perspective, we need to have a look at that. It might be that we'll do a dump out of Snow into an Excel spreadsheet. We'll have our TRM, which has got a whole bunch of applications. We'll have Snow, and we'll need to try and figure out how we marry up the two bits of information.
Yeah, thanks for that, Joel.
Sure.
Just giving me,
I mean, and it might be that we look to professional services to assist with that exercise.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, that's fine.
Can I ask you a few questions just about the date? So the one in the one before, you talk about office hours, and I'll come back to that now. If we stick to this, okay, let's go to office hours.
Sorry. Yep.
You got business hours. As we're a global organization, I mean, does that take into account location, or you? I mean, 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. in Australia is different to 9 a.m.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the business hours that we've captured in here are purely just text fields. So if you wanted some more context around this, then you could kind of modify these fields. And if you wanted, you could add in kind of UK time in here as a text field. In reality, if you wanted to extend that further, you might separate this out again and have actual more contextualized information around business hours itself. In this example, it's purely just a text field.
Okay, so there's nothing fancy there. That's fine.
No.
The next one, in your filtered view of that you did a few moments ago, You got start evaluation date, development date, beginning testing. So, I mean, in terms of some form of predictability around road mapping, I mean, is that something that you have to manually capture per application, or can you say typically we look at a 3-month onboarding process for a new application, so is there a way to have it say, this is my date when I have to move off the application, and it knows your basic template is these phases and it takes this long? If you get,
yeah. So there's a few things around life cycle dates in Abacus, and I guess just in general as well. So we tend to split these up into 2 types. So we've got life cycle dates where you can control them. So these are things like, application launch dates or decommissioning dates. And then there's these separate lifecycle dates of things that you can't really control. So vendor lifecycle dates or regulatory standards coming into play. So these, basically the applications will take into account, both of those types. This one here is purely just the lifecycle dates of the application, but these can also be calculated based on other areas. So one of the roadmaps, and I'll just jump to this quickly actually, just to give you an idea, but one of the exports from Abacus, so this is just a PDF export from Abacus, will give you this kind of view of your life cycle dates of your application, start date, end dates, and you can be much more specific about how this looks and all the customization options around this. But really what's important is understanding then the life cycle dates of its, what we might call interdependencies. The fact that it's hosted on a server that has a life cycle date, these technologies it's using also have end of support dates. So it needs to take all of these into consideration rather than just this top level view.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, this produces gaps. We're using this application up until 2022, yet the server it's hosted on is retiring in something like 2017. So these are the issues we can start quickly identifying through a view like this.
So I noticed that you've got an integration with Technopedia.
Yes.
Which would give us a lot of that kind of stuff.
That's pretty much where the vendor lifecycle dates come from. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So just a question: do we contract with youth for that information, or do we need a separate Technopedia license for that?
Yeah, I mean, it's both. So there's a license that we supply to be able to connect to Technopedia, but then you also need a license from Technopedia themselves. Now, I don't know if you've seen the pricing of that, but Technopedia is relatively expensive. So there are obviously routes around that, which is you might already have this data, so you can import it into Abacus that way.
Yeah, I mean, and if we had from Qualys and places like that, I'm assuming that would have to be an export from them and an import into yourselves. You don't have
from what was that? Sorry.
Qualys.
Okay. Yes. So. Yeah, I mean, the ways we can integrate data into Abacus does vary. So if you're just using some kind of standard ETL process of exporting from one tool and importing into Abacus, that's perfectly fine. Realistically, if it's something that's repeatable, if it's something that you find yourself doing every day or every week, we then might start building some kind of direct integration using our API instead. Instead of having to keep exporting content and importing into Abacus, we just use our REST API to connect to the tool instead.
Perfect.
Cool. So the application list in here is obviously maintainable in here, maintainable outside of Abacus. I am going to come back to this, but
when you say maintainable, so if we wanted to give this on to our end users, do we have to give them when I say end users, I'm talking about the relevant application owners and things like that.
Yep.
So we'll have a small subset of core licenses. I think we're going to do 3 to start off with, and we might grow that to 10. Mm-hmm. Do we need those licenses to do this, or is there the web front end which allows people to update content as well?
Yes, so you can use Abacus to update this content. So Abacus Studio, which is basically what I'm showing you here, so it's the main product. Mm-hmm. You can export these catalogs to Excel or Google Sheets or SharePoint, which is a separate integration. But then there is a web front end to this as well, where users might interact with the tool. So I will come on to this in a bit more detail, but I'm just going to quickly open up this view to show you that essentially what you can do is give someone the URL. So this is Abacus Enterprise, and they can actually come in here and update this information directly. So they don't have to go through the Abacus front end. They can actually use the data in here and start updating content.
Okay.
Okay. So where is that data then stored?
Yep. So the hosting options available to you is obviously stuff that you can deploy on your side. We can host it for you, and we use AWS. And that again comes down to maybe the start of deployment method. So whether you're going for a desktop-based solution or a SaaS-based solution, the options available to you obviously differ based on that. In terms of geography, in terms of where that data is specifically stored, so UK clients typically in London or Ireland, now you do obviously have the option to decide where that's stored as well.
Okay. Well, you just said something there. You said if we choose a desktop solution or a SaaS solution, but we're looking at the studio here, which is obviously a desktop solution. Is there a complete SaaS-based solution that doesn't involve the studio, or do I need some people with the studio?
Yep, sorry, so I'll clarify. So Abacus Studio is the product here. Abacus Enterprise is the way you can start basically publishing this content out for other users to consume. Yeah. So Enterprise is purely browser-based. So it's just a web front end, if you like, so to the portal or to the publishing pages. Abacus Studio is a desktop solution, like I'm showing you here, but it's also a cloud-based solution with the exact same UI as what you're seeing here and the exact same functionality.
So just so I understand from my side, the data store can be either on-prem or cloud, and that's the enterprise portion, and you can interrogate the data either through the enterprise web front end or the Abacus Studio, correct?
Yes.
So we're not saying we're going with Abacus Studio and creating our own repository on our desktop and then having to manage the data.
No. So every user will connect to the same repository, so everyone will have access to the same information, everyone will be working at the same time, and obviously making changes that other users can see at the same time. It's all pretty much live.
Okay, cool.
Okay. So the application catalogs, I will come back to these in a few minutes. I just want to open up one of the diagrams we have in here, though. So we talk about capability maps. You said already that you already have one, which is great. You also have your own TRM. The capability map that we've got in the...
Can I ask a question around those? So if we've got them in Visio, are we able to import those capability maps? Oh, you've already got that. Okay, cool.
Yeah, sure. So from Visio, you can import directly into Abacus. So you can import directly all your diagrams straight from Visio.
Okay, thanks.
So you don't really need to go through and start replicating those or reproducing them. You can also export your diagrams to SVG formats. So we don't really have if you like, a fully fledged round-tripping process of importing and exporting directly to Visio. Typically, once you import your Visio documents into Abacus, you typically want to start using Abacus to start creating things then in the future. Now, of course, you could still use Visio. Most of our clients, if not all of them, obviously use Abacus to draw their diagrams, and there are obviously some key benefits to doing that as well. The capability map that you're seeing here, in terms of references, so we built this, or certainly imported this from a standard body called APQC. So they do what they call process classification frameworks, or PCF models. Yeah. So that's a good resource to take a look at, obviously, even if you still have your own capability map. In terms of the one that you do have, is that something that you've built yourselves, or are you taking that from a reference from somewhere?
We had an external consulting company come in to help us with it, but it's an legal specific one.
Yep, sure. So APQC do industry specific ones as well. So it's quite a nice resource just to take a look at. The other thing as well is the TRM model you have. Is that, obviously it's based around technology, but is that all technologies that you use internally and you have kind of a preference for what users should use? Is that kind of the style of that?
What do you mean by that?
So certainly some of the customers we've worked with, they have their own TRM model, and part of that is a view of saying, you have these types of databases that you could be using internally, yet this is the preferred one that we think you should be using. If you do decide to use these other ones that are available, give us some rationale behind why. So I was wondering if you use that TRM model in effect to try and capture some of the data to help you with rationalization projects at all?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely we do. Although I'm not particularly happy with our TRM. I think there are some quite large gaps in it, actually. So just before we go on to that, I was just just talking about
APQC, yeah.
So the capability maps that they have, are they something that you provide with Abacus? So are you saying that there is a legal industry capability map that would be in Abacus that we could look at?
They've probably got about 12 different capability maps, and we've got a couple in Abacus. We've got a banking one, we've got the generic one, which is what you're seeing here. This one actually goes down to 2 levels, but no, we don't have the legal one. I can't remember if they do have a legal
services?
One.
Is there a professional services one? Because it might not be that far off.
There could be. I can take a look. Certainly, you guys can take a look as well. And if there is, or if you see anything on there that's obviously of benefit, we've obviously imported the ones that already exist into Abacus or some of those, so it's an easy thing for us to do.
Okay, cool.
For the particular capability model here, or this business capability model, you'll notice that some of these boxes, or if not all of them, have different colors. So in Abacus, because it's all property-based or metric-based or metric-driven, you can start heat mapping or color coding these boxes according to different properties. So you might color these according to how many applications underpin them. So that's essentially just a count of how many connections it has to applications. And that's the kind of thing that can give you some instant notifications of saying, actually these are the more complex capabilities we have, and these are more of the simple capabilities we have. Now, the reason I mentioned coloring this according to properties is you might typically have exactly the same view, maybe 5 or 6 times, all with some different type of lens applied to it. So one might be looking at different cost metrics, one might be looking at performance or complexity or capability maturity. So the idea is to start producing this type of view and then just overlaying a lens based on the kind of question that's been asked. Okay.
Yep.
The other thing you mentioned was from a process perspective. So as much as you said you don't, or maybe currently don't have any processes that you're currently managing, you can certainly extend these capability models to drill down into the process view. So this one is based on BPMN. It's actual process flow end to end. Now, if that's not the level of detail you want to capture, you can pull this back up and just basically have that capability model or some kind of high-level logical process view as well.
It's about a pragmatic starting point. So we do have some scattered processes that various different people have maintained in various different formats.
So I think the nice thing is you can start with capability and we can start to add where we have them. Is that correct?
Well,
exactly.
We need to validate them first as well. Yeah. But I don't think I would want to jump down a process modeling exercise to start with on day one, because I don't think that's where the value is, right? So doing it at a capability level, I think is...
Yeah, so we put it back up to this level.
Yeah.
No, perfect. So one thing I want to go back to, actually, I mean, there's a bunch of other views in here. One thing I'll say is all the content I'm showing you is available in the trial as well. So as much as you can see, there's hundreds of diagrams in here for things like application interface views and infrastructure views. One thing I do want to quickly point out is the Explorer tree on the left-hand side, because all the content I'm showing you, and I'll minimize some of these, is effectively in what we call a current state or an as-is or production. And the whole idea behind Abacus is to obviously start modeling what you currently look like, but ideally start looking at what you might look like or want to look like in 3, 6, 12 months' time. And the benefit of this, of course, it means you can start what we call evolving these architectures into these different states. So we, of course, have one in here for application rationalization projects that we have running. And as you can imagine, this one is actually going through our entire application landscape and looking at which ones we might be retiring. There's a benefit of doing that within a single location, because what you'll find is this list of all the applications we have in our current state. I did kind of skim over this quickly earlier on, but it has these 2 values in here. So business fit and technical fit. And we can start mapping this out, which you'll see in Enterprise in a few minutes, onto a bubble chart. But these values themselves are actually calculated from other properties we already have. So for things like business fit, we might take into consideration things like how many capabilities is it supporting, how much is it costing us, how many number of users are there, how critical is this application, and that then goes into the algorithm that we have that calculates this score.
So
concept. Yep.
Question, I think in the licensing you mentioned what option is, I think you get the base license, you don't get the algorithm, you have to pay for the algorithm license additionally? Do we know? I mean, is that correct? And what that cost is?
So the algorithm or the simulator module is separate. Cost-wise, I can leave that to the sales guys, so Matt and Joe can expand on that. What I will say though is, part of this I think is trying to understand how feasible it would be to use some of these out-of-the-box metrics or algorithms at the beginning, because it's worth identifying what data you already have, and is there data in there that could be beneficial in this way.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm sure the sales guys won't like me saying that, but it's the case of saying, well, do you actually have enough data? And by enough, usually it's 2 or 3 properties to start driving some of these algorithms from day one.
So if I go back to that views, the future states that you had there, you said you could have multiple ones. So, I mean, if I give you an example from our side, we would have, we might have items around global shared services that we wanted to transition to, and we might also have a grouping that's relevant to our SAP landscape. I'm assuming it's entirely possible to have those 2 existing and being able to do analysis on both of those, either combined or separately.
Yes, so the main reason for having these as separate architectures or separate states is to run some kind of trade-off analysis. If we decide to go with option A or option B, what are the benefits of that? Is it lower cost, faster deployment time? Is it higher levels of service? All that kind of metric-based analysis is the reason why you basically split these off. And so yes, you can start comparing these to what you look like now.
So can you archive these sorts of things as well, or how does it work in a scenario where we are very regionalized and we might not necessarily, I could see that very quickly we'd end up with lots of sort of different folders in the Explorer structure, and we might not want everybody to see everything because it's not relevant. Is there a way of just showing the right content to people or archiving stuff?
Yeah, so as much as these act as different states in time or projects, they can also be sandbox environments where you might just want to kind of do your own thing. So you can actually set permissions on these that says who can actually see them or who can edit them. So that gives you some control over who can actually create these in the first place, but also who can actually see all of this content. So you might hide all of these from certain people and only give them access to maybe the current state.
Right, so it's a permission-based model in there. Okay, cool. I'll look at that. Thanks.
Okay. In terms of that, I mean, would you be able to? So you got the application rationalization project. You go and create that view. You then go. Can you copy that to a new one, and then you go and tweak it from there? Because you spoke about different options and hypotheses. As opposed to going
yes.
from scratch.
Yeah, so essentially it's basically branching off. So you might branch off this application rationalization project and now have option A and option B perhaps.
Yeah.
And now obviously there are going to be different changes across those, and it's up to you as architects to decide which option you're going to choose. Now you could choose neither option, and they might be classified as projects that have, I'm not going to use the word failed, but stopped. So you might archive these projects off. So at least in the future, when this kind of initiative comes up again, you have this historical view that says, hey, we've tried this way and this way, it didn't quite work out, maybe we should try this a different way. The benefit you have of obviously capturing all this data in this list-based view as well, as much as we have 1,000 applications here and probably 50 or 60 columns in total, you can compare what you look like now to any of these future states. So if we did a quick comparison to what the applications look like today to what it looks like in the application rationalization project, Abacus will start highlighting all of the differences. So our future view maybe has new processes that use these applications. There'll certainly be applications in here that don't exist in our future state because they've been decommissioned. So we have all of these changes that we can start analyzing. In reality, this particular view right now is a lot of changes. So you'd actually start looking at filtering this, splitting this catalog off for regional-based views, actually maybe only seeing 1 or 2 properties that are of interest, and certainly not this entire view of everything on one page. You can then actually start synchronizing those changes across, because let's say this project is successful. You can either make this now your current state, or you can start synchronizing the changes across these architectures. So synchronize all the recommended changes. Now there are various approaches to that. These multiple architectures are essentially one way of managing this in separate locations. But you could also take the approach of just managing all of it within one architecture and have time-based properties in all of your objects and relationships. I know we've got a bit of time left here, so what I want to show quickly is going back to Abacus Enterprise, because I think once you start creating all the content in Abacus, part of hopefully the ambition here is to start trying to push this out and publish this for other people to see. Now, that essentially means having two different types of users in Abacus Enterprise. One that's editable, so like you can see in here, I can actually change some of these values, create new connections to new suppliers, for example, or you can have this as a purely read-only view. There are a few benefits to using Abacus Enterprise, which obviously means you can start creating different views for different stakeholders. It also means you can start creating new visualizations in here that you wouldn't have been able to do in Studio. So one of the views you can see here on this business dashboard is this business capability map. So you would have seen this in Abacus. We can have the exact same data on this tree map view, but just represented slightly differently. So the easiest way to probably think of this is Studio is maybe the more technical views, and the way you publish content out is maybe for kind of C-level people or executives who actually just want to see this information at a quick glance. The business capability map in here essentially then allows you to start drilling down into these areas. So we can drill down into our operating processes, how do we manage customer service, how do we develop customer care, and that's made up of all of these different applications. For your particular application-based view, if I just reload this, we've got working SSO behind the scenes here, so it does like logging me out now and again. If I go to the application-based view, you'd have pretty much something that looks like this perhaps. So these are all the applications grouped by the region or location. So then you can start drilling down into those locations and understanding which applications they own or support or use.
Okay. How do we go about creating a visualization? Because obviously if I've got an application catalog, I'm going to want to select what fields I want to go into that tree view to kind of, or that tree map to drive how it works. How do we kind of create those sorts of visualizations?
Yeah, so some of these visualizations, like these diagrams and catalogs, come directly from Abacus. So when you start adding what we call these portlets on here, I can choose a catalog from Abacus that I've produced. Yeah. Or I can choose a diagram that I've produced in Abacus as well. But these additional visualizations, like these charts and tree map, are effectively created directly through this visualization panel. And what this does is it allows you to go through one of these and select the components or the connections that you want to use to effectively start producing a view like this. There's a few benefits overall from using some of these views, is that most of them are linked together then. Yeah. So if we take a look at this particular view, which initially might seem relatively complex, but this is the business fit and technical fit scores we were talking about in Abacus Studio. And this is all 1,000 applications. In reality, what you start doing is then drilling down into these areas or filtering according to other properties. So you might say, well, let's only look at the highly critical ones. So there's 207 of those. Maybe only look at the applications we're looking at retiring. It's 58 of those. And maybe only the production applications. So now we've got a nice view of all the applications that are highly critical to the business that we're actually looking at retiring. So this is, you can think of this as stages to roadmaps. What are we doing, when are we doing it, and how are we doing it? And this is essentially how you start building up those views. There are a whole bunch of other dashboards on here. I certainly won't go through all of them, but these are, again, available for the trial as well. But you might be producing some kind of mission-based views as well. So application rationalization projects. There's a particular dashboard on here for GDPR, which is probably not a surprise. So there's a whole bunch of different views that you might be creating according to who's actually looking at this. Permissions model applies here as well. So if you don't have permission to see or do anything in Abacus Studio, then you won't have the permissions to do that in here either. And you can decide which users actually can see these dashboards in the first place. it's probably a lot of information to take in, and probably scratching the surface of what Abacus can do there. So in terms of questions and I guess what you've seen so far, or maybe stuff you haven't seen, it's probably worth going through some of those.
Can we have a look at the level 3 meta model again really quickly?
Let me open that up. So one of these views in here. Yep. I'll just zoom in slightly so you can see that.
Yeah, that's cool. So if we go to the bottom half of it, we're looking. Yeah. So if I was going to pick a sort of relatively, well, for us anyway, a relatively complex application, it's probably actually not really that complicated, but we've got a knowledge application, so it involves a bit of SharePoint. So it's a web application. It's using various services, to be honest, from SharePoint 2013. It's also using an independent federator application. It's using an external index, which is integrated into another internal systems. It obviously sits on top of AD and so on. Well, how do you kind of, if I've, what we've got is documents with that sort of information in. Our application list would just call it Athena, which is what we call it. No, we wouldn't call it global search, which is what we call it. Okay. Yeah. But actually the detail of what sits underneath that and how it's all interrelated sits in Word documents and videos and stuff. But how do we go, what's a good process for going about and taking that kind of information where it's distributed across the different components and getting it into Abacus?
So if it's obviously sitting in different locations, we can't export content directly from Word. We can produce Word documents, but not import directly from Word. So it's about probably doing that in a step-by-step basis. First, getting a list of all your applications in, then maybe pushing content from Word to Excel to get into Abacus as well. The problem with some documents like Word is that they might be very detailed, and really what you want to do is just link Abacus to that document. So when we took a look at something like these business capability maps, or certainly even some of the application views, you might link these to external documents that describes this application or describes the capability in more detail. But it would be a case of slowly importing that content step by step.
Just on that, would one tend to use Abacus to store that information and feed it up, so the actual Word files, or would we say, for example, keep it on say a SharePoint site and you reference it there? And the question is, where do you hyperlink to an external data repository, or would you recommend storing within Abacus?
So you'd hyperlink, because Abacus doesn't act as a document management system, so it doesn't hold any of the documents that you produce. Any content that you produce from Abacus is usually published out to PDF or Word and stored on SharePoint. And if you have existing documentation, then we'd link Abacus or hyperlink to those views.
Okay.
And are you able to classify it? Are you able to link? So let's say we've got an application, we've got a design document produced, and it was done as part of a certain project. So one is stored, we store it by application, but are you able to record not just the design, but also the project the project site where that project was run from? Does that make sense?
Sorry, then the application is linked to a specific project that's then linked to a specific document?
Yeah, so we'll have a scenario where, let's say I'm going to take something simple. I'm going to implement Windows 10.
Yep.
And when I implement Windows 10, let me take a step back, I implement Windows 7. I do a design document for certain different aspects of it. However, I will also have project-related documentation that might be relevant. Is there a way where if I go to the application or the capability for Windows desktop, I can then click on it and it can show me hyperlinks to all related information? So i.e. it's either technical documentation or external data repositories that have content relating to that information.
It's just a URL.
Yeah, so each link that you add on here, there can be multiple links. So you'll have links to technical documentation or project documentation. Obviously, depending on how users work, you might also have those links within those documents anyway, so as references. But obviously, you can link to multiple documents in Abacus. I just wanted to come back to one thing quickly. So in terms of, you were talking through applications then and how they're linked to different areas. One thing I do want to quickly show is kind of using the diagrams in Abacus. So you can draw just like you would in Visio in here, but one of the kind of nice features is the fact that all of these applications, or certainly any object, have connections to things that don't necessarily always appear on this view because we don't want them to. And that's effectively this references window on the right-hand side that says this application is connected to these components. One of the nice things you can actually do is drill down into these applications, and this will actually then produce a diagram for you showing everything that's directly attached to this application. So this is your, if you like, your first stage of impact analysis. You know, if I'm going to be changing this application or retiring it or introducing new technology, these are all the areas that I need to consider that are going to be affected by that change. So this is hopefully what Abacus can start pushing you towards, where currently all this information separately, with it all being in one place, you can start driving some of these views.
Yeah, okay.
So I'm about to time out in terms of my time, so apologies for actually coming in late. One of the questions I've got, so typically when you roll this out, do you have a starter engagement, so do you have an accelerator engagement model? So apart from just providing software, you can go to clients, do a basic Q&A type thing, and then do some accelerating work to get us up to speed?
Yes, we do. Certainly, Joe and Matt can follow up on that in a bit more detail, but we have a couple of programs or projects. One's called a Rapid Starter program and one's called a Customer Success program. And essentially, it's a way of quickly getting you up to speed with training in Abacus, helping you import your data, and trying to produce some of the deliverables within the first 5 days for the Rapid Starter one. Now, obviously, these can be tailored according to what your preferences are, but there's also consulting packages that you can leverage and obviously use our expertise to help you get up and running as quickly as possible. But we will follow up with the full details of those as well.
Okay, well, so will you get him to follow up with us on that conversation?
Yeah, of course, Joe will follow up with that.
Okay, perfect.
Joe's on the call.
Hi, Joe. Sorry.
How you doing, Brett? Look up. In terms of pricing, we have two different training packages. One of them is the Rapid Starter program, and the other one is the Customer Success program. Based on your budget, I think the Rapid Starter program will be a bit more suitable. So we're looking at 3 users. That gives you the studio license, the editor user license, collaboration, configuration, and algorithms. So all that we can certainly fit it within your budget. I think the question is whether you mentioned that you prefer to break it down into installments, and that's something that we have to discuss. So yeah, look, I think we can look at your budget a bit further and follow up with a phone call, see if we could fit it into the 30K that you mentioned.
Yeah. I think we have a follow-up conversation in terms of that. So I don't know if you want to start with a couple of options that we can discuss in a meeting, or you want to take away, think about something, and then we have a pre-read into the meeting, so we can have a.
Yep. Yeah, that'll be good. What's your availability for tomorrow?
Tomorrow's off.
Okay.
I can't do tomorrow.
What about Friday?
I mean, if you're able to, I mean, so Simon's off next week and I'm off the week after. So, I mean, would you be able to send something through to us to review?
Yeah, certainly I can do that.
By the end of this week, and then we set something up for 2 weeks' time?
Yeah, we can certainly do that. Now, in terms of currency, did you mention that you need to see it in a British pound, or?
No, just do it in British pound. Yeah, I mean, we work backwards to our budget.
Okay, no problem, because I think you mentioned US dollars at the beginning or something like that. From my memory.
So globally, we quote all of our budgets and do our budgets globally in US dollars as the primary currency.
Yeah.
So my budget is roughly around 30,000 US dollars.
Yeah, I think we can fit some 30 user subscription base with possibly one Rapid Start program. That would be possibly the best bundle for you at this stage.
Okay.
Very good. Well, thanks very much for your time. Thanks, Simon, and thanks, Brad. Sorry we had a bit of a technical problem at the beginning, but look, hopefully Andrew answered all your questions.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you very much.
I mean, if we've got any more questions, we'll follow up over email.
Yeah, feel free to send an email. Thanks very much.
Thanks.
Cheers, guys. Thanks for your time.
Yeah, thanks, Brad. Thanks, Simon.
Thanks.
Good.